Well, hey there, you're on the internet, I have some free time, and welcome to the Triple N Network, where all you newbie nib nerds can find all the news you need. Okay, if you hear a bunch of clanging in the background, I apologize. My neighbor recently got really into CrossFit, and apparently it's salmon ladder time. So ignore any clangs. Anyways, let's look at an ink today, shall we? Today's ink is in sample form, and it's from Poland. It's from the company K.W.Z. And it's one of their standard inks. It's not one of their iron galls. It's just Azure #1. I think it's funny that all the iron gall blues are called blue, and all the non-iron gall blues are called Azure. So, yeah, I don't speak French. Anyways, this is blue #1. I think there are 6 standard blues, I think. And then I think there's a turquoise and a blue-black or something. But anyways, yeah, so I thought I'd start from the top down. So, Azure #1. Now, the 2 pens I used were these. This is a Nemosine, I don't know, Singularity, and it's got a 0.6 stub. And as you can probably tell, since you can't see through the tines, it's usually pretty dry, and it was. And then I also used this JinHao 250. I can never remember if it's supposed to be an X250. This is just the #5 nib it came with. It is unaltered. It was a little wet with this ink, but usually it's pretty even, so I don't know. Yep, maybe it was an off day. Now, I picked out a few comparison inks, but I'd just like to start with, spoiler alert, this ink looks a lot like the standard blues of a lot of the major companies, and I don't really like most of them. That's a personal thing. It has a slight periwinkleness to it, this kind of blue, and yeah, I mean, some people love Waterman's Florida Blue or Serenity Blue. I am not interested. I usually leave it in a Hero 616 and let it dry out and condense so that it becomes more interesting. So yeah, I'm not thrilled about this blue. However, if you like things like Waterman's Florida / Serenity Blue, or say Schaefer's Script Blue, which is actually a little bit darker and maybe just a tiny touch more purple, or periwinkle I should say, or Lamy Blue, which is maybe just a tiny bit more blue, or Monteverde Blue, which is actually very, like, shockingly similar. But yeah, so, yeah. Alright, let's check out the chromatography, because there was something about this chromatography and this ink that I was not expecting, because it was so like the standard blues. So, here it is. And this is the regular chromatography test. You can definitely see where that drop of ink was put. But you can see that a lot of it is still there. It's fighting being pushed up. You just get these little bits along here. And the camera probably won't show it, but there is, I mean, it's even hard to see with the naked eye, but there's almost like a cream color, like an off-whiteness through here. But yeah, so there's that. And then here's where I let it dry, which there actually isn't a whole lot of difference. The dot did get a bit darker, and less of it is being pushed up. But, yeah, so I was not expecting that. Now I wanted to see what it could sort of stand up against, and actually water did a pretty okay job when you really sort of, like, scrub it into the paper. It does leave a little behind, but I was able to wash it on my pen with water just fine, like any other ink. 1/3 bleach solution, amusingly, turned it kind of cream colored, but such a light shade of cream it's hard to see. Ammonia pen flush really started to get it moving, but because it's ammonia and this is paper, it did sort of start to break up the paper, which is why it's dark. If you look, it's got a weird texture. Hydrogen peroxide actually kind of turned it gray, but also really got it moving, so I don't know. Anyways, paper test, top down in density, Clairefontaine 90 grams per square meter. Yep. What can I say? It's a standard blue. You know, I mean, I feel like we're all pretty familiar with these blues. However, you know, I know some people really love them. So, you know, here we go. You can see that there is some shading. I'm going to try and keep my fingers out of the frame because they're kind of a mess right now. Yeah, there's some shading. Not a lot. It's soft. There is a slight purpliness to this ink. That fairly dry 0.6 stub took 11 seconds to dry. These slightly wetter than usual 250 took 18 seconds, but yeah, there's actually not a ton of shading in the scrubbies, but you know, whatever. Yeah, no bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo, no sheen. Very well behaved. And then we get to the water test. And this was a lot more remaining than I was expecting. I mean, one of the things that, well, a lot of these comparable inks, especially Waterman Serenity Blue, is known for is that it washes away really quickly. I mean, it's easy to wash out of your pens, but it has no water fastness. Now, even this 0.6 stub, which really didn't put down much ink, there's something there. If you had to recover that, you probably could. Now, next up is Fabriano paper. It's 85 grams per square meter. It's totally chlorine free. It's this is Echo Claw, so it's endorsed by the Forestry Service or something. I don't know, but yeah. So as you can see, it's kind of the same. You know, it's not a ton of shading. It's a very sort of soft standard blue on here. Dry times were almost the same. That 0.6 stub took 11 seconds. The 250 took 20. And I know I'm not going to be able to get this on camera, but there is a very mild, like you almost can't see it even in person, like red haziness to the darkest parts of the scrubby, but as I say here, the flow, and this is something I'm assuming because of the flow in this 250, it's just a little bit on the wet side, just a tiny bit. I'd say it's probably a 6, judging by past experience in that 250, but this one in the 0.6 stub, it was very normal, so that's why I sort of put it in between at the 5.5. There is some shading. It's a very gentle sort of shading. No bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo, no sheen. But this kind of surprised me. So this is really, really gone. Like, you can barely see anything that was written with the 0.6 stub. The 250, you can see, like, part of the A, part of the E, the rest is, like, barest little shadows. You can see the dots from the 250. A lot of it's gone. That, I mean, after seeing this in the water test, or the chromatography, I was kind of confused, but Next up is Rhodia, 80 grams per square meter. And actually, it's pretty much exactly the same. The only difference is instead of 11 seconds for the 0.6 stub, it took 10. And instead of 18 or 20 for the 250, it took 17. Again, still very gentle, soft shading. Here we, again, like, get the barest little, like, hint of red. I mean, I'm serious. In person, it is hard to see. Never mind on camera. It's just, it sort of brings the periwinkleness to this a little closer to the front. But yeah, actually, as I was rereading these notes before filming, I can't see any of this so-called red halo sheen. I can see absolutely none of it at all. So I probably should have redacted that. But anyways, still very well behaved. No bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo, no sheen. And again, the water test was kind of worse than I was expecting after the Clairefontaine, but actually it's right on par with, you know, Lamy. Actually, Lamy did kind of okay. Waterman, Mont Blanc's Royal Blue washed away very easily. But yeah, yeah, so that 0.6 stub is really, really gone. I mean, it's about as easy to see in person as on camera. The dots from the 250 are very easy to see. About half of each letter remains. That S is, like, totally gone, but yeah, so. Next up is Tomoe River paper, which is known for drawing out shading and sheen and dry times, and also show through because it is very, very thin. Now, I laid it on really thick here in the scrubbies to try and ensure I could at least, there we go, get you this, like, hint of hazy red, because that's really all it is. Like, what you see on camera is exactly what you see in person. It's just sort of a hazy red color. There's a little bit of it in the writing, but, I mean, not quite the same. There is a little bit of a halo effect on here. You can see sort of the dark outline and part of the inside of the scrubby. Now, it did draw out dry times, and unevenly. So the 0.6 stub took 17 seconds to dry, whereas the 250 took 23. So that was sort of like a 7-second jump here and like a 5-second jump here, or like maybe more like a 3. I don't know. So that was kind of strange. Now here, it can look a little thin in that 0.6 stub. I mean, if we get down here to this last line where it says feather spread, that looks pretty thin, right? I mean, it looks like there should be some more ink in that ink. So in some ways it's right on par with a lot of the major brands. They do keep their inks a little on the thin side so that they're easy to wash out. So that is something that happens. So if you're into that, that's cool. You do get, you know, a little bit more shading out of undersaturated inks, but I'd like to see more ink in that ink. Now, there's no bleed, no feather, no spread. There might be some echo, maybe, like especially in the scrubby, but I think that's because I laid it on really thick. But I mean, it's always to taste. If you're very sensitive to it, that's something you should, you know, just consider when you go into it, because I mean, this paper is so darn thin. But anyways, this paper also loves to let ink slide away when you add more water. And it kind of did, but considering what we saw on Fabriano and Rhodia, I was expecting there to be almost nothing. There's a little bit more than nothing. You can definitely see something in that 250. I mean, the S is gone, and half of the W is gone, but the rest is kind of there. If you absolutely had to recover that, you could. That 0.6 stub, though, just because it was writing so thin, I mean, it's kind of dry, and then, you know, so that's pretty gone, but yeah. Now, for the next 3 tests, I only used the 0.6 stub, except to write the name, and here's the world's worst 20-pound copier paper. Now, we got some pretty serious spread on here, so let's compare line width with this, with this. See how much broader the lines got? Yeah, the absorbent paper will do that. And I say we get feathering, but it's not like we get huge distracting feathers. It's just sort of like, okay, let me find an example. Oh, okay, here. You know, it's things where, you know, if there was like a blob of ink, like a bead of ink at the end of a line, we start to get little bits of feathers. So it's not everywhere, and they're not big and distracting, but there is a very distinct woolliness to the texture. You get absolutely no shading. Here, because it gets kind of, the color gets kind of flattened, it really does start to look pretty periwinkle. Here, it absorbed into the paper almost instantly. Yeah, I mean, okay, that's the 250, but I mean, we saw how dry writing this was, this 0.6 stub, and we're still getting this, which is not encouraging. I mean, it doesn't come all the way through, but that's a lot considering just how darn dry that pen was writing, so yeah. But anyways, more absorbent papers tend to draw the ink in, make it harder to wash out, which is definitely what happened here. I mean, there is a lot remaining. Yeah, if you had to recover that, you absolutely could. Honestly, I think the hardest thing would be the way the paper wrinkled up. But yeah, so pretty positive. Didn't feather, didn't explode. Definitely pretty good. Next up is Mead Notebook Paper. It's very common for American school children. It's thinner than 20 pound. It's extremely cheap, both in price and production. And yet, we don't get nearly as much spread as we did on the 20 pound. Maybe we get a little, but there's essentially no shading. Yeah. And lately, this Mead paper has been feathering a lot, but comparatively, I mean, compared to what we've been seeing lately, I mean, look at that. That's really not bad. We get a little bit here and there. We're really, oh, there at the bottom of the S in Singularity, and the Y. Like, the rest is looking pretty good, right? But yeah, there is no bleed at all. I mean, I consider myself picky, and I would not hesitate to write on both sides of that, so that is definitely something. Bear in mind that 0.6 stub is a fairly small stub, and it was writing fairly dry, but still. I mean, look, even this 250, you can see it because of the light hitting the paper, but it never came all the way through. So that's pretty impressive. And this paper tends to freak out when you add water, but this actually did pretty well. It didn't feather, didn't explode, didn't start just like turning into fuzzy cactuses. If you had to recover that, you absolutely could. Would not be much of a struggle at all. Now, lastly, is Moleskine paper, which I hate because it hates ink. Yep. And, yeah. Okay, I'm going to try and show you this. I don't know how much it's really going to show up, but it looks washed out. You know, it looks almost as though it's been left in the sun. You know, like it's been slightly sun bleached or something. It's just, it looks like the color is degrading on the paper, even though I keep these in a dark box when I'm not using them. So, yeah. And we get this woolliness. Like if I bring this in, you can see the texture of the pulp in the paper within the writing. And we get these feathers. It's kind of gross. And it took 7 seconds to dry, which I can't explain. Now there's no bleed. There's no bleed, but we do get a lot of like show through, which I don't know. It's a personal thing. How comfortable are you with it? However, this water test is kind of nuts. I mean, it was like half of it wanted to wash away, and the other half wanted to feather twice. I don't know. That would not be the easiest thing to recover. So, yeah. Alright, so there you go. KWZ's Azure #1. Yeah, it's a very familiar shade of blue. You know, it's like Monteverde blue, it's like Lambi blue, it's like Schaefer blue. It's a lot like Florida blue. However, sort of the thing that surprised me and that sort of stuck out was that it actually has a little bit of water resistance. It does have hints of periwinkle. It can look a little thin on certain papers. Yeah. Not bad. I mean, it behaved really well on cheap papers, and I do not count Moleskine as a cheap paper because of how much they make you pay for it, but yeah, really not bad. For your consideration from the Triple N Network, if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching. Bye.